Hello everyone, this is Nahkvi from Birds of Play, and welcome to Learning to Love, a series where we take a hard look at some hard-to-love things from the world of video games and try our best to reason ourselves into loving them, shedding a more favorable, or at least more charitable light on otherwise heavily criticized aspects of games, for better or for worse. In this video, we'll be looking at Blitzball, a partly mandatory but mostly optional minigame from Final Fantasy X. If you're not familiar with Blitzball, it's an underwater sport and is played in these gigantic spherical domes absolutely filled with water, where the aim of the game is simple enough, kicking the ball into the opposing team's goal, even if it means getting a bit physical. In terms of real-world counterparts, Blitzball incorporates elements of football, or soccer if you like, rugby and water polo, making for quite a unique mixture of real-world sports that are being referenced. Although the part where Blitzball players are able to breathe underwater for an indefinite amount of time without coming up for air is where I think we can safely assume that we have entered the realm of fantasy. Yoshinori Kitase, the game's director and the man responsible for the creation of Blitzball, has gone on record to note football as a prime influencer. This was due to the sport's surging popularity in Japan in the wake of the news that the country would co-host the 2002 FIFA World Cup alongside South Korea. He was also inspired by a certain racing sport he came across a long time ago in a galaxy far away, pod racing having already made its debut in Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, and Kitase wanting to incorporate his own take on a fictional sport in his latest game. Although Blitzball wasn't originally planned as a mandatory part of Final Fantasy X, the sport grew in scope until it had become an integral part of the narrative. As a result, Blitzball is overwhelmingly popular in Spira, the world of Final Fantasy X, to the extent that we are reminded of other fictional worlds that have similarly been characterized by an almost single-minded devotion to a singular thing, such as Pokémon training in the world of Pokémon. In Spira, this single-mindedness is, however, understandable, as Blitzball serves as a symbol of unity for the people of Spira and presents a rare opportunity for cheerfulness in the face of a common tragedy. Spira's tragedy manifesting itself as the mysterious entity known as Sin, which poses an almost constant threat to the population. We only really start to see the centrality of Blitzball being challenged in the wake of Sin's demise, specifically with the emergence of alternatives such as Sphere Break, a math-based coin game introduced in Final Fantasy X-2, and more generally with the population of Spira starting to expand their horizons regarding what meaning life can offer. As a testament to the sport's popularity, however, it nevertheless remains seemingly unchallenged for over 1,000 years, running parallel to Sin's reign of terror. This allows the main character Tidus to avoid the risk of what could be described as a temporal culture shock, as he finds himself transported 1,000 years into the future and into a vastly different world, wherein he is still able to find his bearings relatively quickly thanks to being recruited by the very first Blitzball team he comes across. But all of this begs the question: if Blitzball is so incredibly endearing and overwhelmingly popular in the world of Spira, why is it that it hasn't caught on in the same way with players actually playing the game? On the surface, or perhaps we should say underwater, Blitzball is a genuinely intriguing sport. One way the developers really did right by it is by aggressively selling the concept of Blitzball to the player right at the start of the game. For this purpose, the game's opening cinematic features Blitzball superstar Tidus of the Sonic and Apes resting in a pool of water before the big game, a roaring crowd unable to hold back their excitement beckoning the athletes to the playing field, where they engage in a three-dimensional, gravity-free, no-holds-barred fight for the ball, Tidus even somersaulting out of the water to kick the ball mid-air. As if that wasn't enough, a heavy metal song composed by series veteran Nobuo Uematsu plays in the background, just to make sure the message truly hits home. All of this, however, makes it all the more frustrating when the gameplay ends up not living up to the hype. In practice, Blitzball in Final Fantasy X is played on a two-dimensional plane as opposed to a three-dimensional one, with minimal control involved, at least compared to the sport's cutscene incarnation. It doesn't help that each game can take a while to finish, a fact that is made especially frustrating considering that luck can be a huge factor and that individual actions take a while to play out. The result is a divisive experience, to say the least, that players are forced to undertake at least once for every playthrough. To make matters worse, the odds aren't exactly stacked in Blitzball's favor, with several factors that might contribute to a bad first impression. Firstly, Blitzball isn't the simplest minigame. which might actually be a good thing, but having all of its complexities painstakingly explained in an unintuitive tutorial that takes approximately 10 minutes from start to finish is enough to turn most people off. Secondly, the very first game the player gets to play is perhaps also the most difficult one. This is due to the fact that the Visage Aurochs, the team that is at the player's disposal, is an exceptionally weak team, not having won a single match during the captain's tenure. As if this wasn't bad enough, even Titus, who is proclaimed to be some sort of Blitzball superstar, seriously underperforms in this first game, even though he is at least a capable shot. Titus's full potential, however, is locked behind yet another minigame that is necessary to complete before unlocking the so-called jacked shot, a special move developed by his father that greatly improves Titus's chances of scoring a goal. The only chance the player gets to complete this minigame is on a boat on the way to play Blitzball in Lucca. Failing to do so, making it even more difficult to win the first match, making for yet another hurdle on the way to truly appreciating Blitzball. Considering all of this, it's quite understandable that a lot of players never pick up Blitzball again. Those that do might be enticed by its promise of reward, Walker's overdrives and celestial weapon only unlockable by completing tournaments and leagues and winning them as prizes. This is a very time-consuming process, requiring 24 to 26 games of Blitzball at bare minimum, in order to acquire all of the exclusive prizes. Each game taking approximately 15 minutes. To add insult to injury, the game does little to celebrate your victory, for example by offering some added story content. The only thing there is more Blitzball, as if Blitzball was a reward in and of itself. If you do get into the game, you might find ways to make the experience a little bit more tolerable, maybe even enjoyable, learning more about how it works and finding ways to never again suffer the same humiliation. But mastery of Blitzball often feels like exploitation, employing strategies that take advantage of flaws in the game as opposed to meeting it on its own turf. This includes playing keep away with the ball by passing it around out of the opponent's reach to kill time, spamming Titus's most powerful shots, and perhaps the least honorable strategy, hiding behind the goalie to keep the AI off your back. These methods are justified due to the importance of luck. They can quickly turn the tables in favor of the AI, the clock slowly running out as you helplessly watch what basically amounts to an in-game cutscene about you not being good enough at Blitzball. However, once you get the hang of it, you might find yourself coming back, showing the AI the same disregard it had previously shown you, simultaneously feeding your inner sadist and masochist by swimming circles around your enemies at the cost of your own valuable time. For all its faults, Blitzball has some merits, fueling our toxic relationship with the sport. The main thing being the idea of it sounding so right on paper, letting us think that we can change it, or better yet, that someday someone will do the sport justice. When Blitzball made a comeback in Final Fantasy X-2, substantial changes had been made to the gameplay, turning it into a sports manager game where you don't actually play the game. Instead, you manage the team and passively watch the matches play out. This is an even bigger departure from the spectacle that is Blitzball, even though some might find it more palatable due to it having a smaller role in the sequel. More recently, Naoki Yoshida, aka Yoshi P, director and producer of Final Fantasy XIV, hinted at the return of Blitzball in the popular MMORPG, getting many fans excited. Perhaps competing against other players would introduce a level of fairness absent from the original. The fact that Blitzball has yet to be introduced to Final Fantasy XIV, however, points to difficulties in implementation and perhaps some worries that the nostalgia and novelty factor won't be enough to keep players engaged in the long run. So perhaps we are better off not hinging our hopes on hypothetical remakes and instead learning to live with what we got. If you are unable to love playing Blitzball, maybe you can still love the idea of it, or at the very least appreciate how ambitious of a minigame it is, even though it may overstay its welcome with just one game. Ultimately, Blitzball is a victim of false advertising, demonstrating a rift between the way it is presented in theory and practice, promising an athletic event worthy of the admiration of an adoring crowd, and delivering on a mediocre sports game simulator in a glorified aquarium. Learning to love the game requires subverting expectations about what the game could have been, and then subverting them again once you learn what it really is in favor of fighting dirty against an unjust system, taking the power back from those that have wronged you, all for the sake of a shiny ball with blades that there's no business not killing Waka the way he hucks it up against his body. This is the main appeal of Blitzball, taking the reins of fate back into your own hands, all the while trying your best to forget that your efforts over the course of many hours of play can never amount to anything other than a self-destructive revenge fantasy. Thank you for checking out our series, Learning to Love. We are the Birds of Play, and if you have something that you find hard to love, aside from your parents and or children, preferably related to video games, let us know down in the comments below. We're just starting out, so if you like the video, you would do us a huge service by subscribing to the channel. We have a lot more content in the pipelines that will soon see the light of day, and we hope you will be there to see it. Until next time, subscribe! I guess I have to go work on my bird sounds now.